Good morning, guys. So today we're going to talk about CPCTC. And you might be going, what are you even saying right now? But this is something that's going to be used all the time. Okay, so we're on page 40. This is lesson 7. CPCTC stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So what that means, if you know that two triangles are congruent, then any matching parts are also congruent. And the reason is going to be this, the CPCTC. Or actually writing out corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So let's take a look at this little warm-up here. Are the triangles congruent and why? Remember your 5 ways: side, 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 angle, side, angle, side, angle, 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 side, not to be confused with side, side, angle, because that spells a bad word whether you look at it forward or back, or high leg, hypotenuse leg of a right triangle. Well, if we look, remember, always follow the picture. We have side, angle, and then a side. They're clumped together. You don't want to go around the other way because you're skipping over angles and sides. So where they're grouped together, side, angle, side, no matter how you look at it. And the same thing's true down here, side, angle, side. So yes, why? By side, angle, side. Name 3 pairs of congruent parts not marked. Well, I see A and B are marked. C would match D. So angle C is congruent to angle D. Also, I can't say angle B because there's 2 angles, so why don't we put a 1 in there? Angle 1, which is the same as angle, if you follow the path, A, B, C. But again, if you mark it with a 1, you can use that. And that's congruent to angle E. All right, and then the third side that's not marked yet, BC, we'll use 3 lines, is congruent to, now look at the order. We went from the right to the left here, BC, ED. You want to make sure, I know that DE and ED are the same, but look at C matches D. So C and D should be the second letter. All right, write a congruency statement for these 2 triangles. That just means tell me which 2 triangles are congruent. So triangle, and it doesn't matter what order you go in for the first triangle. You just want to make sure that the second triangle matches it. So triangle ABC, well, A matches B, so it's triangle B. B matched E, and C matched D. Okay, so let's give this a try. Statements, reasons, givens are already in there. You're welcome. All right, so let's see what we have. BD bisects angle ABC. So if we follow that path, angle ABC is being bisected. What does that mean? Angle 1 and angle 2 are congruent. Angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. And again, if you want to use 1 and 2, you have to draw them in the picture. And that's definition of bisect. All right. Next, we have BD is perpendicular to AC. So that means that this angle and this angle are right. So I'm going to call those 3 and 4. Angle 3 is we have to say they're right first. So angle 3 and angle 4 are right. We don't want to skip any steps. The reason we know that they're right is definition of perpendicular. Notice my first 2 reasons were words from the statements. All right, so now that we know that they're right, now we can say angle 3 is congruent to angle 4. And the reason, all right angles are congruent. Okay. So let's kind of back up a little bit. It says prove AD is congruent to CD. It's not giving us that. It wants us to prove those parts are congruent. Anytime you want to prove parts are congruent, That's going to be your last step, CPCTC. But before that, you need to prove that the triangles are congruent. So these are both parts of these two triangles here. So if you notice, right now we have angle, angle, and we have no more givens, but we have this freebie, this shared side. So if I say that BD is congruent to itself, then we can prove the triangles are congruent by angle, side, angle. So BD is congruent to itself. And the reason we know that, no, we can't say because it's obvious, it's the same thing. It's the reflexive property. Okay, so now we've got our angle, side, angle. Don't go by the order of the picture. It looks like it's angle, angle, side, but again, don't go by the order that we proved it, because you could have done this way up at the beginning. Go by the picture. Where are they grouped together? Angle, side, angle is congruent to angle, side, angle. So we're going to say our two triangles are congruent by angle, side, angle. All right. So when you're naming your triangle, again, it's like above. It doesn't matter which one you start with. I'm going to start with ABD. It's making sure that you have the other triangle set up properly. So what angle matches A? C. What matches B? Also B. So it's CBD. By angle, side, angle. So now because we know these two triangles are congruent, all their matching parts are congruent. So we could say angle A is congruent to C by CPCTC, or angle side AB is congruent to CB, but we're proving AD is congruent to CD. And again, that's by corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So let's write that out. Corresponding parts. That's why we're using this, because we're proving two parts are congruent. Of congruent triangles are congruent. If you want to write that out a few times getting started, that's fine. But on the Regents and on any test or quiz, CPCTC is perfectly acceptable. Just don't mess up the order. Okay. I'm actually going to pause this video, take some time, get your givens written in there. You should pause the video as well, get them written in there, and then we can walk through it. Okay, so you should have written down your given statements. If you haven't, pause the video before we move forward. All right. Again, it's so important that you are labeling your picture, not assuming anything. If you want, you can immediately start with any freebies you see, or you can just go through and take care of your givens first. It's totally up to you. So I'm going to start with my givens. AD bisects BC at E. So what's being bisected? BC is. So that means BE is congruent to CE. Mark it on your picture. BE is congruent to CE, and we knew that because of the word bisect. So over here for your given, definition of bisect. All right, and we have a side, so that's good. AB is perpendicular to BC, and DC is perpendicular to BC. So that means angle B and angle C are right. And we're just going to say that over here. And we can use B and C. We don't have to put numbers in because there's no other angles happening there. So number 5, angle B and angle C are right angles. And the reason that we knew that is by definition of perpendicular. So we've used all our givens. We said they were right, but now we need to state that they are congruent. So angle B is congruent to angle C. Oops. If I change it to number 6. All right angles are congruent. All right, so now we have a side, we have an angle. We don't have any other givens. Do we have any freebies? We sure do. I see vertical angles, and you cannot say angle E and E. You could say angle AEB and DEC, but if you mess up the order, you get it wrong. So I would just put a little 1 and a 2 clearly marked there. So now I'm going to say angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. Vertical angles are congruent. All right, so again, if you notice, it wanted us to prove that AB is congruent to DC. It didn't give us that. It wants us to prove that. So since those are parts, our last step is CPCTC. But first, we need to state that the triangles are congruent before we can say their parts are congruent. So right here, triangle, I'm just going to say ABE is congruent to triangle. Since I started with A to the right angle, it's going to be D to the right angle, so DCE. And the reason, look at your picture, not at the order that you went here. Angle, side, angle is congruent to the other angle, side, angle. So now you can say any of the parts are congruent. Angle A is congruent to angle D. AB is congruent to DC. AE is congruent to DE. Any of those parts are congruent now that you've proved that the triangles are congruent. So we can say, because again, what it asks you to prove is always your last statement, AB is congruent to DC by corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Again, corresponding, maybe at least say it out loud, corresponding parts, we're proving parts of congruent triangles are congruent. All right, last one. Pause the video, put your givens in. I'm going to do the same. Okay, so I just quickly wrote my statements and my reasons for my givens. It wants us to prove the parts. So our very last statement is going to be CPCTC. But before that, we want to prove our two triangles are congruent. Again, if you want, start with your freebie. I see a freebie right here. Or you could start with this. It's totally up to you. So we may not even need the freebie. Number 3, C is the midpoint of AD. All right, so AD is being cut in half. AC is congruent to DC. By definition of midpoint. And we have a side. The only other given that they say is AB is parallel to DE. It doesn't say that they are congruent. They're parallel. So remember, alternate interior angles are congruent. So angle A is congruent to angle D, but also angle B is congruent to angle E. Those are two sets of alternate interior angles. They're on opposite sides of the transversal, each transversal. So we don't even need our freebie. We could say, all in one step, angle A is congruent to angle D, and angle B is congruent to angle E. And the reason, you have to use the parallel and you have to tell me what type they are. Alternate interior angles are congruent when lines are parallel. So look at, you have angle, angle, side congruent to angle, angle, side. So the two triangles are congruent by angle, angle, side, and therefore their parts are congruent by CPCTC. Sorry. So I'm just going to say triangle ABC, and it doesn't matter which one you start with. Triangle ABC is congruent to triangle. Since I said A, it's got to be D because those are the ones that match. And then EC. And again, we said that the reason, follow the path, angle, angle, side. Angle, side. If you have a hard time with that part, you should write down your 5 ways to prove and then see which one works. All right, so now any of the matching parts are the same. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So which part did we need to prove? AB is congruent to DE, and you're done. Okay, so anytime you're proving parts, CPCTC is going to be your last step. Just above it, you have to prove the triangles. Okay, so I'm not seeing anything else loading, so the video is going to stop there. And if you want, you can get a jump start on the practice that we'll be working on in class tomorrow. Have a great day. If you have questions, stop by the math lab.